Yeah. No, so I look at it like, wow, the organization's worth that much? And, you know, I couldn't get free coffee?
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I'm Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, Jake Croucher, and we open the show with your Commanders somehow still catching strays. By
the way, they deserve every stray they catch.
Yes. I don't know if they're strays
There's
anymore.
not enough strays to, out there. They absolutely should. I love Mike McDaniel. By the way, I can't believe they charge for coffee. By the way, NBC Universal, which is worth so much, you know what they do?
What?
Free pretzels, free popcorn when you go to the cafeteria, right?
That's true.
What's better than free pretzel Wednesday?
A lot of investigations going on into the Commanders. I'd like this coffee situation investigated because that's an absolute disgrace.
It's pretty bad look.
It had better be mentioned in the Mary Jo White investigation. Yeah. That's what I want. Just a little footnote.
An asterisk at the bottom.
We're still waiting
morale
for that
was low.
investigation.
Yeah. There
By the
not
way,
well caffeinated.
Mike McDaniel approval rating just through the roof. Has to be the most likable coach we've ever had.
He's unbelievable at the press conference, everything like that. I think I told you guys this, but at the combine, it was unbelievable. They probably the best moment of the combine was somebody asked him about, I think it might have been Aaron Rodgers, but somebody else. They asked him about a player that hadn't been declared. Maybe it wasn't Rodgers, but it was a player that hadn't been declared for free agency. Hey, what does Miami think about so and so? And Mike McDaniel was just like, pretty sure he's on another team, and that's a tampering charge. Are you trying to get me fined for a tampering charge? And just sort of leaned into it, and oh, I know what it was. It was who's the kid for the Bills that had openly said he wanted to play for the? Was it Poyer? Who was it that wanted to say they wanted to play for the Dolphins?
Might have been, even though Poyer ended up going back.
I know, but
yes,
I think it was right, and. Anyway, so I think
he wasn't fooled either way.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike McDaniel. Good delivery, Mike McDaniel.
It was good.
Yes.
He's got an odd cadence, but it works for him.
Yes.
And
very good comedian. He's going to have a great career in the media. It's a shame you couldn't get the plays in on time in the playoff game in Buffalo, but outside of that, he had a fantastic first year.
Yeah, he really did.
Well, fellas, we got to kick the show off with the biggest news, and that is no surprise. We are starting with Lamar Jackson has requested a trade, and it's not really a sense of he just did this. Apparently he did this quite some time ago.
Yeah.
But waited to go on a bit of a tweet thread right before his head coach was speaking this week, and this was what Lamar had to say.
Why do you think fans is capitalize?
They're important.
Is that what it is?
Yes. They're distinguished, right? Don't you capitalize things that are distinguished?
Yeah.
Matthew never capitalizes my names in text. But
Take a hint.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. A letter to my fans. I want to first thank you all for all of the love and support you consistently show towards me. All of you are amazing, and I appreciate you all so much. I want you all to know not to believe everything you read about me.
Goes for me, too.
Let me personally answer your questions in regards to my future plans. As of March 2nd, I requested a trade from the Ravens organization, for which the Ravens have not been interested in meeting my value. Any and everyone that's met me or been around me know I love the game of football, and my dream is to help a team win the Super Bowl. You are all great, but I had to make a business decision that was best for my family and I. No matter how far I go or where my career takes me, I'll continue to be close to my fans of Baltimore, Flock Nation, and the entire state of Maryland. You'll see me again.
Super Bowl not capitalized. The word C is capitalized. But that is bearing the headline, as they say. That's big news. Lamar Jackson, demanding a trade. The truth is that they don't have to trade him. They don't have to trade him. He's under the franchise tag, and they could say we're not trading you, and then Lamar has a choice to either sit out and forfeit a lot of money, or go and play for the Ravens. But it feels like this is coming to an end. One of the things that I wrote in my Combine column was that I had heard from a source basically saying that the Ravens were a little sick of Lamar as well, that there was frustration on their side. Again, this is all rumors. I'm not reporting it as news, but I'm just saying, one source had told me that their sense was that they had heard that the Ravens were annoyed with Lamar as well, whether it was the fact that he didn't have proper representation or, official representation that they felt like they could deal with, or just frustration on the games missed, or the, just the lack of progress in making a new deal, whatever it was. It feels like Lamar Jackson's time in Baltimore has come to an end.
We'll say the trade request tweet, I think it's a little bit blunted by the report that came out pretty shortly after from NFL Network that he continues to negotiate with the Ravens. So I would think that there is an element certainly of just gamesmanship.
But it could be also, they could be negotiating a sign and trade as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's also within the, and within the realm of possibility. So you can say it's a little bit of gamesmanship, but that's a big. Again, you think about Russell Wilson, right? Russell Wilson was like, I don't want to trade. No, I love it in Seattle. Meanwhile, all the reporting was like, no, behind the scenes, Russell Wilson's like, get me the hell out of here. Yeah. And then, and then his agent was like, well, if he was traded, he wanted to go to one of these 4 teams or blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And even Aaron Rodgers, with his dissatisfaction, prior to, mending fences with the Green Bay, I'm frustrated with some of the decision making. Rarely do you see a player come out and blatantly say, especially a player of that stature, come out and say, no, I requested to be traded. I want out. You'll see me again, Baltimore Ravens flock, but I'm out of here, which is basically what he's saying. Yeah. Right? And don't you think maybe it is gamesmanship, Jay, but Connor, don't you guys think that, if a week from now they're like, hey, I've signed a, 6-year, $180 million deal with the Ravens, doesn't Lamar Jackson look foolish? Maybe he doesn't care because he's got whatever money he's gotten. But
yeah, I guess I'm so accustomed to the NBA where this happens all the time, and then players just end up with the same team where they've requested a trade, and this situation is different. But it's just so hard, Connor, to envision what's the resolution here, because he's not going to get the contract that he wants from anyone.
Not from anyone, but you wonder how much more can he squeeze out of an external team. I think that's what it's come down to. Is Baltimore has set a line. He is not willing to go down to that line and wants to see what his external options are. And that market hasn't existed yet either, because teams could speak to him.
No, Chris Mortensen, my friend and former colleague from ESPN, tweeted out something about the fact that there's some concern among that he spoke to some owners, that the NFL owners meeting is currently going on right now, and that he talked to a few owners about Lamar Jackson's situation, and there was some concern about the amount of missed time that he's had. Yep. Especially when you consider it's a massive price tag. Because it's not just about hey, we've got to give Lamar a ton of money, and obviously a lot guaranteed. Whether he gets the amount of guaranteed money that Deshaun Watson got or not remains to be seen, probably unlikely. But the fact is you're going to have to pay Lamar a lot of money, and then you're also going to have to pay the Ravens something. You're going to have to give up draft picks or assets or a combination. So it's a big price tag. Now, he's 26 years old. He's a franchise quarterback in a league that has very few franchise quarterbacks. He's actually already won an MVP, right? He's a guy that puts butts in the seats, right? I mean, he sells jerseys, right? He's an electric player. He is one of the faces of the league. He is a star in every sense of the word. So, there's a case to be made. There's a strong case to be made that he would do a lot of franchises in the NFL well. But it's interesting to see how this plays out. The other thing I'll just say, just weirdly, is pretty much every other team is sort of being mum, I should say, except Washington, which is oh yeah, we're out. Well, we weren't asking. Just want to point out we're out. Hey, I want to ask you about Sam Howell. I appreciate you asking me about Sam Howell because we're out on Lamar Jackson. You're well,
well, let's hear it. We do have the sound. I mean, for those that don't know what we're talking about, this was Washington's comments on the Lamar Jackson chase.
We probably end up making serious contract offers, having serious discussions with somewhere between 10 and 20 of those guys each year. So there are a ton of talented players that could help us, but we don't end up talking to for various reasons. And Lamar falls into that category.
But we will not say what those reasons are.
No, right? Yeah, there are players that could help us, but we don't talk to them. Why not? Why would we not want to talk to players that could help us? It doesn't happen. Not every deal is going to happen, but it just I could just. Can you imagine? Hey, Matthew, I'd love to have a meeting because we've got some ideas for Fantasy Football Happy Hour about how we can improve the show. Nah, don't want to take the meeting.
Yeah. Sure, they're great.
I'm sure they're great, but
we're fine.
I just whatever. I'm good. Take the meeting. Like, why do you not talk to players that can help? I don't understand that.
It's very
What's
silly.
your job what is your job if you're not talking to players that can help you?
At the most important position in the sport.
By the way, a position that Washington has been in the desert desperately searching for a long, long time. We prefer to spend $28 million and a couple of picks on Carson Wentz. No. Why would we want to talk to Lamar Jackson? We had Carson Wentz last year.
Yeah.
We've got a 5th-round rookie. We got outbid for Taylor Heineke. Why would we want to?
We pivoted to
why would you want
Brissett.
a young, unanimous MVP winner? We do actually have odds on the next team that Lamar Jackson will end up at. Probably not going to be the Washington Commanders, who are plus 1,000, but the Indianapolis Colts, Connor, are now the favorite, plus 225. Looks like they're not going to get Stroud or Young in the draft. And so, I mean, Lamar and the Colts all of a sudden makes them pretty interesting in the AFC South.
Patriots Lamar Jackson on any of these teams, obviously, any one of these teams immediately becomes a contender. The Patriots at 450, I don't know if you saw the report, but Meek Mill, he's a rapper.
Yeah, not a congressman.
There was some confusion on the pre-show
Which
call
Meek Mill we were discussing.
by some production
Senator
personnel as to what Meek Mill does for a living. Meek Mill is a rapper and a very successful one at that. According to Meek Mill, Lamar Jackson would like to go to the Patriots. That is what Robert Kraft said, that Meek Mill told him. By the way, I love the fact that Robert Kraft and Meek Mill text.
I know,
and
that's the best thing about it. It's so ridiculous. It's great.
But it's true. But by the way, I 100% believe that. Because they're like Meek Mill and Michael Rubin, who's the CEO of Fanatics, are very close. Michael Rubin and Robert Kraft are also very close as well. So there's a circle there. I have been at a Fanatics party where I have seen Meek Mill, Michael Rubin, and Robert Kraft all together. So I love that Meek is a Patriots guy. Although Meek's from Philadelphia, I would assume he'd be an Eagles guy. But
I think he is. But for some reason he has the Patriots connection. As well.
Exactly. And they've got a quarterback. Philadelphia's got a quarterback all taken care of. So there was an interesting list there of potential places for Lamar Jackson.
All of these teams immediately become Super Bowl contenders with Lamar Jackson, just immediately.
What did you guys think?
By the way, the Jets are on there.
Jets are on there.
Can you imagine, if there's a,
swerve off the highway?
Yeah. It is it's the meme of there's Aaron Rodgers and there's Lamar Jackson, and it's whoop, he's driving that way.
Oh man!
Could you imagine?
Yes,
that's what I'm cheering for.
Amazing.
Yeah. Joe Douglas did come out and say they're not doing that. But
the Packers, I would love that just because Packers and Aaron Rodgers are stuck with each other in this $50 million.
And he shows up.
And he just shows up. He's just like, I want my $50 million.
Yeah, I'm here.
He's just he's carrying a bag of ayahuasca and he's just like, whatever.
Having the time of his life at camp.
I don't care. Whatever. Screw you, Packers.
A bag of ayahuasca.
What did you guys think? I think this is the first
time. Does it not come in a bag?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would take the under 0.5 on coming in a bag. I don't believe so, but I could be wrong.
I have not taken ayahuasca, but I assume you smoke it, right?
I thought you drank it. I thought you drank it, but I could be wrong.
Drink it?
Again, it's been a
we
while.
need an expert on this panel.
Can someone do the research on how you get ayahuasca into your body?
Yeah.
Either way, even if you drink it, it could be in a bag.
Yeah. We need to text Meek Mill to text Aaron Rodgers to find out how you ingest ayahuasca.
It doesn't come in a bottle. You know what I mean? If you drink it, it doesn't come in a bottle of ayahuasca.
A cocktail of ayahuasca?
Like CBS.
What do I want? Do I want a nice red? Or should I do the Camus? Or ayahuasca. All right, tonight. What are we doing?
Oh man.
Aaron Rodgers.
It only took us 2 minutes to get off the rails today.
I'm not even going to try to get us back on. I'll just keep us moving.
Anyway, the fact of the matter is that much to be done in the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes. I feel like it's interesting that the Ravens weren't listed as an odds. I wonder what you could get odds on Lamar Jackson ends up playing for the Ravens this year. That would be interesting odds too, right? In terms of what.
I think they should still be the favorite. I think that's the
I
most
do
likely
too. That's
outcome.
what I'm saying. I feel like, again, right, because there's some posturing. If he doesn't get what he wants from someone else, and the Ravens aren't going to just give him away, obviously. So Ravens would just say Lamar, you can play for us for $35 million, or you can sit out. And again, remember, Lamar's been playing under his rookie deal, which is still nice, but he was the 32nd pick overall. He doesn't have the same kind of money as Josh Allen, right? As some of the other quarterbacks that were taken in his year. So, I don't know. That's tough to sit out for $35 million.
Ayahuasca is a herbal drink. It contains chemicals that affect the brain and might be unsafe.
Do not
Disclaimer.
drink it.
Yeah, it's,
Disclaimer from the show.
It's delivered by a shaman as well. I don't know many shamans, but anyway.
I
that's how
do
you
feel like
continue
I
ayahuasca.
do feel like we're in the off season now, and so we're trying to sort of figure out what we do for the show next year going forward. Like,
More
you know,
ayahuasca.
right? Well, listen, we've added Connor. Connor's a full-time member of the show now. We're thrilled to have Connor. Me and you obviously are stuck here. But
Damn
I
contract.
do think a shaman would be a nice addition to the
shaman
staff.
up
We just
there.
throw him back there.
Yeah, put some ayahuasca on tap.
Absolutely.
Next to the Premier
Some
Lager.
remodeling
Right,
of the
exactly.
this
Just,
summer.
like,
But
can we
safe
call
ayahuasca.
Mr. Applebee's and be like, hey,
Any shaman?
right?
We have an
yeah,
idea.
exactly. We have an
Listen.
idea.
And Applebee's would be like, no,
you know,
we don't
like
want to
maybe for happy hour.
Yeah.
You know, because happy hour when you're eating good in the neighborhood, like, you know, and you got happy hour is great at Applebee's. Could they offer that? I'm asking. I don't know.
Maybe they want our good ideas.
I bet you
Yes,
they don't.
yes.
I don't think they do.
The Commanders don't want good ideas. So, all right, let's keep it
Yeah,
moving
they
along.
keep insisting. It just feels like they insist a little bit too much. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, I think they doth protest too much. They
You know,
doth.
I was in a hostel in Lima in Peru, and a group of people were going to do ayahuasca, and they asked me if I wanted to come, and they explained what happens, and I was like, I'm out.
Didn't sound like my
I'm
good-
completely
yeah.
out.
Well, you did hear them out.
Yeah,
I give
heard
you
them
credit
out.
for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I bailed. But yeah, anyway, Aaron Rodgers is a tougher man than me.
It is a, I'm, you know, as anyone that's read me for a number of years knows that I'm a big Howard Stern fan.
Yes.
And so Robin Quivers, who's the co-host of that show, she has done ayahuasca, and that has become a long-running joke on the show as well. Her experience, she just detailed her experience. She enjoyed it, but it is a lot goes. There's just a lot goes in and a lot goes out.
Yes, that's
candidly.
the thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Disclaimer: this show is not encouraging you at home to partake in the
I said it was
cocktail
unsafe.
of.
Yeah,
I said
it's
it was
unsafe.
unsafe.
Ayahuasca's unsafe. Don't
It's
do
unsafe.
it.
It's no good.
All right, guys. Another name we got to get through here: Ezekiel Elliott. Adam Schefter reported that he has narrowed his options down to the Eagles, Bengals, and Jets, but we did hear Robert Saleh rule that out yesterday. So it seems like it could just be Eagles and Bengals right now. Jay, is there a landing spot for Zeke that you're intrigued by, or do you think we're kind of past the point of him being this impact fantasy running back no matter where he ends up?
I mean, if he ends up on the Eagles, and just with the amount that they run, the amount of scoring touches that he's going to get, the fact that they've got Rashad Penny, who's a huge injury risk, then I think there's a pathway for Zeke being fantasy relevant. Like, he's probably going to be fantasy relevant as a touchdown-dependent back wherever he goes, but, I mean, the days of him being a workhorse back for some team is just done, I think.
I would agree with that. Although Cincinnati becomes interesting as well.
Sure.
There's a non-zero chance that Joe Mixon is on another team.
Yeah.
Come fall. So with the fact that Samaje Perine has moved on, he's now a member of the Denver Broncos, and so Mixon's also dealt with injury issues as well. So if he goes to Cincinnati and Mixon leaves, for one way or the other, there's talks that he could potentially be cut or traded. He's got some off-the-field issues that he's dealing with as well. They were, listen, they have Chris Evans. They have former Texas A&M great Travion Williams. I love Travion Williams. I've always waited for him to sort of get a shot. But, there's not much there beyond Joe Mixon where you would feel like if Ezekiel Elliott, even if Mixon stays, could he have Samaje Perine's role from last year with maybe a little bit more touchdown equity given his skill set in the red zone? And obviously, if anything were to happen to Mixon either in season or between now and the start of the season, he becomes interesting as well in Cincinnati.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on and see where Zeke ends up, of course, and what kind of workload he could be seeing next season. And another player,
Maybe he goes to Baltimore. Maybe they decide no quarterback.
Just all running back? Direct snap?
All direct snap,
Yeah.
all running backs.
It'd be very
just
on
five
brand.
different,
Yes.
just 5 different running backs.
The Snoop
Just-
Huntley-led Ravens offense in
Yeah.
2023.
Zeke wouldn't have fumbled the dive from
That's
Huntley
fair.
at the goal line against Cincinnati. Ravens might be in the Super Bowl
fair.
if
Makes
Zeke is playing quarterback.
Makes you think. Another high-profile veteran that is expected to be on the move, guys, obviously DeAndre Hopkins. We've talked a lot about him. MMQB's Albert Breer reports that the Cardinals have now granted him permission to speak to other teams about a potential trade. We don't exactly have the list. We've heard rumblings of the Patriots, and that was kind of shot down. We've heard all different kinds of
The
rumblings
Chiefs,
of Hopkins.
the Chiefs
that's the
keeps
one.
the
Bills.
Chiefs
That's the
keep
one.
coming in, and you're
That's
just
the
sort of
fun
like,
one. Yeah.
that's the
Bills, yes.
that's the one where you're just kind of go, ooh.
Yeah. Put
yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins in the Juju Smith-Schuster role. It's not bad.
Look at what Hop
It's a
did.
little old upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
career
know how.
stats
I
for
think
Hop.
Hopkins would play a lot more outside than Juju did, but still, he'd be in the he's obviously a different player. He doesn't have the speed of a Tyreek Hill, but the fact of the matter is that Hopkins doesn't win on speed. He wins on size. I just can imagine, Patrick Mahomes just saying, Hop, I'm going to throw it. Hey, Hop, I'm going to throw it somewhere near you, and you just go up and get it. And I'm sure DeAndre would be like, yeah, get it somewhere near me, and I'm coming down with it. Which is, by the way, what happens.
Yeah.
That would be,
It feels like what's notable right now with Hopkins is the Bills and the Chiefs being in this. Hopkins is going to be a big-time fantasy relevant player heading into next year. Coming off last year, the suspended year, when he came back and looked good, as we always discuss.
Yeah.
But Bills or Chiefs, guys, he'd be playing with an elite quarterback.
Well, and by the way, you just think about it from his point of view. He's made a lot of money over his career, but a lot of years in Houston, it hasn't gone the way he hoped for in Arizona. But now here's a chance to possibly win a Super Bowl, whether he goes to if he goes to Buffalo or he goes to Kansas City, or if there's another elite team. But feels like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be able to have a say in sort of where he goes. And so that becomes really interesting if he's on one of those superpowers in the AFC.
Yeah, and he's only 30. It's not like he's 35 years old. He is only 30, and also he didn't have a full season that he's coming off in terms of wear and tear, even though he got a ton of targets. And yeah, particularly what he showed in those first 2 games back, where he had over 100 yards in each of them and just looked like Nuke Hopkins again. And just the highlight reels, the touchdown he caught against Minnesota, he looked like the same guy. And so yeah, he's going to be. If you put him in the Gabriel Davis just in that slot and move Davis across where Davis is now 3rd in the pecking order, that team suddenly is just an absolute monster.
Yeah. Hopkins expected to be on the move. 2 wide receivers that are not anymore. Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Broncos coach Sean Payton told Tom Pelissero, we're not trading those 2 players. When asked about them, I don't know if we can trust Sean Payton at this point.
What's going on with your face?
Yeah, when you're like, oh, they're not on the move. What do you mean they're not on the move? Just because
I think they didn't
every
get the
NFL
price
coach
they
always
wanted.
tells the truth.
Yeah.
Look, the fact of the matter is again, this was something in my Combine column. I was told they are quietly shopping Cortland Sutton. I think they'd prefer to move on from Sutton more than Jeudy for whatever reason.
Money.
But the fact, I think that's partially it as well. But make no mistake, if they got a good offer for one of these guys, they're doing it. Now, they've said they still want a 1 for Jerry Jeudy, and you think about some of the, Elijah Moore got a 5th. You know what I mean? When you look at sort of the wide receiver market that's out there, it feels like it's pretty soft, and I don't think you're getting a 1 for Jerry Jeudy when you've seen some of the price tag of some of the other guys that have been in the move. Not that Elijah,
Hopkins won't get a big package.
No, exactly.
So why would Jerry Jeudy? And people would say money, but you're talking about the impact of the player.
Right.
I think the Broncos did not get the price they wanted for either of these guys, like you said, Barry, and now they're holding on.
Yeah, but I think that
could change.
Yes. It could certainly change based on what
Draft
happens
night.
on draft day and everything like that.
I think to your point, the big takeaway here and the thing to remember is that coaches do lie. They lie all the time.
All the time.
Pete Carroll, his injury reports, you just can't read anything into it at all. So I would not be wouldn't be going out and just locking in the big Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Denver Broncos jersey purchases for the family. Let's just see where they are at the start of the season.
I also feel like this is just kind of a let's see, let's blank around and find out kind of year for Sean Payton in Denver, right?
That's the actual official slogan for the Denver Broncos.
Let's blank around and find out.
Season.
It is a little bit of that, right? I feel like he's just like, we'll see what can we revive Russell Wilson? Can we get him back? Let's see what we have in our offense. But they'll either be like, hey, we've got something here and we're going to build upon this, or you know what? Hey, we're going to tear it all down. We're going to get rid of Russ. We'll get rid of the receivers and we'll start anew. A year from now, if it just doesn't go as well as planned.
Another coach that spoke was Colts head coach Shane Steichen. He said Gardner Minshew is coming in to just compete. We've heard the Colts connected to Lamar. We've heard the Colts connected to this quarterback class. They obviously signed Gardner Minshew as what we would presume to be a backup, but the head coach not writing off that Minshew will have opportunity. Also
just a bit of a slap to the face of Minshew with the phrasing. He's just in here to compete. If he ends up with the job, not great. But I don't know. I think that we will definitely see some Minshew at some point this season. I think Minshew has shown that in spot starts he can be fantasy relevant. Think back to the game he had against Dallas this season, filling in for Jalen Hurts, where he throws picks, he makes bad throws, but he also compiles a lot of stats and makes a lot of the big throws too. So yeah, the Colts are just a weird situation at the moment. Coming into last season, the Colts were minus 110 to win the division. They were favored over the field to win the AFC South. And now it seems they're rebuilding, but they've still got a lot of talented veterans. They've still got Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, offensive line that's not good, but Quentin Nelson's there, it'll get better. So they're just a weird team to track, I think.
I agree. I agree, and we'll see. I mean, like, just we don't know. I would not feel great about. I would not feel great about the Colts overall if Gardner Minshew were their starter for the year.
No.
But if he were, for what we care about, Gardner Minshew is good enough that he can get the ball to Michael Pittman. He can support a top 20 fantasy season for Michael Pittman. He can keep the offense on the field enough that Jonathan Taylor will be fine. You know what I mean? Like, he's not great, to your point. He's fun. Like, the NFL's more fun with Gardner Minshew in it. It just is, right? He's certainly fun. He's fun to watch and fun to root for. I agree with you. The skill level is not, you know what he is? He's a poor man's Taylor Heineke. Is what he is.
Well, yeah.
Not what you want in the
same,
player comparison
Same
market.
income bracket for me,
Yes.
those two. But yeah, I mean,
I love me some Heineke. But yeah, that's what he is.
Yeah,
Like, he's Taylor Heineke, which is like, he's like, could you get by with him? You could. But ideally, you're aiming higher.
Yeah, he's not like that much worse or worse at all than Carson Wentz was a couple of years ago, where it looked like the Colts were everyone's like AFC sleeper with 2 weeks to go in the season with Carson Wentz.
If they have to go in, I mean, like, I don't think Gardner Minshew is any worse than what they had last year. Like, I think Gardner Minshew is as good, if not better, than Matt Ryan and whatever, Sam Ellinger and
Nick Foles.
Oh, Nick Foles. I mean,
My
I
God.
forgot about the Nick Foles.
Everybody
experience.
does.
Like,
So did Planet Earth.
yeah,
For the better.
fair enough. Anyway,
Sorry, Nick.
by the way, Carson Wentz still available.
He's out
There's
there.
a chance, Cindy. There's a chance for a union. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I think also if the Colts draft a developmental quarterback at that 4th pick, or even if they trade back, I mean, Minshew is coming with Steichen from Philly, so of the leg up understanding the offense, it might be Minshew out of the gate. with
Minshew
this
and
team.
Reichardsson seems like a reasonable
Yes,
tandem.
he's your bridge guy, Minshew,
Right.
to the rookie.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see
Unless
if
they get Lamar.
If they get Lamar, but it's just. Do you think Richardson lasts till 4?
I think somebody's going to trade into Arizona's pick at 3 for Richardson.
Right.
That's what I do.
So my point is maybe they get Levis.
Yeah, and that's a guy that's sitting.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it goes back to Minshew, I think, is going to play out of the gate.
Okay.
A more noteworthy one here, guys. 49ers GM John Lynch said Brock Purdy has earned the right to be the starter in 2023.
That is
Here we
shocking
are.
to me. That is shocking
And
that
they
he would
signed
say
Sam
that.
Darnold.
Why is that shocking to you?
Because they spent the 3rd pick in the draft on Trey Lance.
Yes, they did. But you know what happened? Trey Lance got hurt, and Brock Purdy went undefeated and led them to the NFC Championship game, where then he got hurt. But, like, when you hear John Lynch say he's earned the right, the
big
dude's
statement.
earned the right.
Big statement.
Has Trey Lance lost the right? Trey Lance hasn't played. He's the 3rd pick in the draft. They
Has
used
he
a lot
earned the right to play? He has not. You know why he hasn't earned the right to play? Because he hasn't played. I'm not saying it's his fault that he hasn't played, but I'm just saying the dude hasn't played. How do you go to a locker room? How do you go to a locker room and say, like, listen, I know this guy stepped in and went effing defeated for like
To a win now team.
6-0,
Yeah.
6-0, won a playoff game, and who knows what would have happened in the championship game. How do you say, like, but we're still going back to the guy that's played, 3 games in the last 3 years? What was Trey Lance played 1 game his senior year?
Yeah, showcase game. They didn't have a season.
Right. The North Dakota State, he had the
Yep.
showcase game that they did for him.
Yep.
Then he played he played the Chicago game as a pro, and maybe
He's barely played in 3 years. And,
Right.
And he didn't have a
Brock
huge,
Purdy's played more games as a pro than Trey Lance has.
and was a 4-year starter in college.
Thank you.
I just thought the way that they would frame it would be that it's going to be a camp battle, and that it would be figured out that way, and then you can go with Purdy after that. This seems like they're just completely writing off Trey Lance. The fact as well, like Sam Darnold
That's
surely
the
wouldn't be
part.
signing to be a 3rd stringer. I would bet that Trey Lance isn't on the roster.
It
I would
feels like
think that
he's
they're
going to get
trade him.
traded. That's how I feel about
That
this.
Trey Lance gets
Yeah,
traded?
you signed Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is the role for Trey Lance in this organization anymore?
Yeah, I just don't understand the Darnold sign. You don't Sam.
That's the part to me.
Yeah,
If
so
you went into
Lance
camp and
is
said,
gone.
Purdy,
Except no,
yeah.
the Sam Darnold signing is hey, Trey Lance either isn't healthy or isn't ready for prime time. Brock Purdy isn't healthy in time. But you know what? Sam Darnold is a professional NFL quarterback, like, or whatever. Like, Kyle Shanahan could be like, listen, I made Brock Purdy a thing. I made Jimmy Garoppolo a thing.
McMullins.
Nick Mullins a thing. C.J. Beathard completed passes in my offense. I can work with Sam Darnold. They needed a veteran that wouldn't completely. If the 2 guys they have, if Purdy and Lance aren't ready because of health reasons or in Lance's case just seasoning, if they're not ready, then they needed a veteran who wouldn't completely derail it. So whether it was Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield or Gardner Minshew or Taylor Heineke, they needed a guy like that. They needed one of those. Jacoby Brissett would have been fine for them as well. One of those guys. They needed a guy like that would have been fine. And so how many options did Sam Darnold have? I mean, Sam Darnold crashed out in New York, crashed out in Carolina. To me, this is a great opportunity. Sam Darnold made the right move. Because even if I can get 2 games under Kyle and look like maybe I got a chance to resurrect my career here. But I think that the only argument for Trey Lance is that, hey, we would be embarrassed because we traded up for him. We gave so much draft capital. We gave up to get this kid. But the fact is if they feel like they can win with Brock Purdy, and I don't know why they wouldn't feel that way, because they did. They won 6 games with the guy. Yeah. All 6, every game he started, he won in the regular season.
And a playoff game.
Right, and a playoff game. Then you're just like, okay, well, fine. Yes, we overpaid for Trey Lance. That was a mistake. But by the way, we also got a starting quarterback with the 7th pick. The Mr. Irrelevant, right? We've hit on Brandon Ayuk, and they've hit on so many guys late in the draft, and Elijah Mitchell was a 6th round pick. They've got so many hits, from late in the draft and free agency that they can afford to take a little egg in the face for their 1st round pick.
It's going to be fun seeing Trey Lance in a Ravens jersey in a few months. Feels like that's coming.
All right, guys.
The Commanders just called. They said, we're out on Trey Lance.
They just do not ask us. Yeah. We're telling you now. Don't even call. We're not interested.
By the way, in case you missed it too, we're also out on Lamar Jackson. It's like they interject every conversation with that.
We're not trading for Patrick Mahomes.
And then somebody the Falcons 3-wayed into the call. It's the same with us. Please, we're playing Desmond Ridder. We're playing Taylor Heineke. Yeah. Guys, we also heard from Bills coach Sean McDermott, who wants Josh Allen to begin taking fewer hits in 2023. Judy Batista got to speak to Coach McDermott and basically asked, how do you get him to stop taking so many hits? And if it makes him nervous, McDermott said, absolutely, yeah. I don't think that's a healthy way to play quarterback in this league. And it's undefeated that things are going to happen when you play that style, that brand of football. We have to get adjusted, and it's never going to go completely away, but it has to get where it's workable. Let me throw this to you guys. Does this start to make your head turn a little bit and say, is Josh Allen's running ability going to take a step back next year? Because the Bills are very focused on improving the offensive line, very focused on getting back to the run game, where Allen maybe isn't this alien QB1 in fantasy anymore if they start protecting his body a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
no.
I mean, here's the thing. Maybe, does he run a little bit less? Does he have a few less rushing touchdowns? Maybe. Does that affect us in any way? Are we drafting him lower than we would? No, he's still Josh Allen. I go back to the Cam Newton quote, you got to let the lion roar, right? Whatever it was, right? I think that's the quote. The fact is that Josh Allen last year, 22 goal-to-go carries over the last 2 seasons, that's second most among quarterbacks. 32 carries inside the 10 over the past 2 seasons as well, second most among quarterbacks. When they get in close, a lot of times they'll call his own number, and that's how he plays. He's instinctual. Yes. He's just.
It's not even designed.
It's not. A lot of it isn't designed. Some of it is, and to me, I think that quote is less about, am I worried about Josh Allen's fantasy value deteriorating? I'm not. He's still going to run enough. You know what I mean? He's still going to throw a lot, right? And especially, by the way, if they end up getting Hopkins, Anyway, Josh Allen's still going to be one of the first quarterbacks off the board in every fantasy draft this year. But to me, it makes Damian Harris interesting. You know what I mean? I just think that was a kind of underrated signing that happened during this free agency period. And we all love James Cook, and we want to free James Cook. But I think this is going to be a committee, and if they want to take some hits off of Josh Allen's body, that's one way to do it. Is they get on the 5-yard line and, hey, Damian Harris, pound it in. That's what he does.
Yeah. Two things. One, McDermott, what's he supposed to say to that question? No, we want Allen to take more hits. That'd be great. More hits for Josh Allen. And then 2, it reminds me of what Frank Reich said preseason last year, talking about Jonathan Taylor's workload and not wanting him to have that same workload and wanting Nyheim Hines to be more involved. First game of the season, Jonathan Taylor had 31 carries. It just doesn't. You just have to ride the players with their skills. And what makes Josh Allen so special is that he's able to take those hits, that he is a battering ram, that he's a freak. And so maybe gets minimized the touch, but not really relevant.
The fact of the matter is, and you can speak to this, I think, better than anyone here at the table, but the fact of the matter is that Josh Allen is not RG3. He's not some stick. You know what I mean? Like Josh Allen's like a almost like a linebacker.
He's
like
6'5", 235. He is.
Like he's a big freaking dude who can take hits like that. I mean, that's my point. Is like you don't realize how big some of these guys are. There are some mobile quarterbacks that are like, you're sort of like Trey Lance. You're like not Trey Lance. Sorry, like Bryce Young, where you're just sort of like I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
Or like RG3. That was always the thing, is that RG3 was just like, he was super fast, but he was super skinny. You know what I mean? Like Josh Allen is like a thick dude. That was the thing with Cam Newton too. Cam Newton was just like a big, hard guy to bring down.
Yeah, it's a massive part of Allen's game, and I think for the Bills, when it's crunch time and you need to lean on that, they're going to lean on that. That's what they pay him for. So it makes him special.
Right. He just, instincts take over, adrenaline takes over. Like, maybe when he's on the wrong side of 30, sure. But, like, for next year, Josh Allen still has to be one of the first quarterbacks that's drafted in fantasy.
Definitely.
In a second, we're going to get to some notable free agency moves and trades from Wave 2. But before we do, baseball returns this week, but there's still time to get those drafts in, so be sure to pick up your Roto World Baseball Draft Guide. Get all the best player profiles, rankings, and projections you need to dominate your draft. Go to NBCSportsEdge.com/draft guide and use Pennant25 to save 25% at checkout. And somebody named Matthew Berry wrote
Matthew Berry comes home.
He comes home. Wrote the intro.
I wrote the intro.
It was pretty good.
It makes it feel like I wrote the top 100 prospects, sleepers and busts.
Matthew Berry comes
which
home
I may or may
with
not
the top 100
You'll
prospects.
have to buy this to find out what I wrote and what I did not write. I did write something in this.
This isn't you on Alek Manoah being a bust?
No.
Andres Jimenez?
But J-Rod is taking over. It says Seattle Storm.
Yes.
Although the truth of the matter is that the Mariners. The Storm is, I think, their WNBA team, right?
It's a play on words, perhaps.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Might be, Matthew.
All right, good. Anyway, there's cheat sheets, player profiles, and projections. Anyway.
Everything that you could possibly want.
I have my draft tonight.
It's chock full of fantasy baseball goodness.
Yes.
I will say this. The Roto World started as a fantasy baseball site back in the day. That was the first thing that it was known for. Matthew Pouliot, who still to this day, runs the baseball section, does a great job as an FSWA Hall of Famer, is the guy that hired me. My very first job at Roto World was because Matthew Pouliot hired me. He is as good a baseball analyst as it is. The team over there at Roto World that does the fantasy baseball analysis for us is really top notch. And so if you play fantasy baseball, it is well worth your time and your money.
We mentioned earlier in the show the Elijah Moore trade.
Yeah.
And we have not gotten to go into detail about that yet. The Browns, with the obvious need for wide receiver help besides Amari Cooper, acquire Elijah Moore. And they get also the Jets' 2023 third-rounder in exchange for the Browns sending back this year's second-round pick, which was pick 42 in this draft. The Jets signed McCall Hardman on a one-year deal, so they bring Hardman in. They shift Elijah Moore out. Before we get to all the Jets receiver impacts, let's talk about the Browns with Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore did not have the season he had hoped for last year. Now he goes into what we expect will be a more potential explosive situation for him in Cleveland.
This is the chance for Elijah Moore to resurrect his career. Like, the guy didn't suddenly forget how to play football. This is a guy who showed flashes as a rookie, somebody who a lot of people liked coming out of college as well. And so obviously it went south in New York, but it was hard to see a path to fantasy relevancy for him in New York, not with Garrett Wilson, not with the signing of Alan Lazard. They've also got some other mouths to feed, as we talk about, with Hardman coming in and some of the other guys. So Corey Davis still currently on the roster. So it was hard to see a path for Elijah Moore to have fantasy relevancy this year in New York. Now he's got a chance in Cleveland, where it's really it's Amari Cooper, and then we don't know. There's Donovan Peoples-Jones, and they've got David Bell as well, and they've got some guys, but the fact is that I think there's a chance that Elijah Moore is the number 2 receiver. They've got Njoku as well, who will be a big part of the passing offense, but there's a chance. You're probably not drafting Elijah Moore except you're in a super deep league, but he is. I think there's a chance for fantasy relevancy. There's a chance we'll be talking about Elijah Moore this season as a hot pickup or potentially as a late-round sleeper as we see what Cleveland does the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think you said that Elijah Moore hasn't forgotten how to play football. I don't think Deshaun Watson's forgotten how to play football either, and that team has so much upside the rest of the way. Like, they have the same odds as the Raiders to win the AFC. They have worse odds than the Broncos. To me, the Browns have a ton of upside, and I would not be surprised at all if they win the division and in an AFC title game.
As for the Jets,
especially, by the way, in a division that might not have Lamar Jackson.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, like, you've got the Bengals there that are concerned.
They're the favorite.
Right, but, the Steelers are still, 8-9, 8-9, 9-8. 7 and 10. They're always going to be like kind of middle of the pack. So anyway, yeah, Browns become interesting.
So with this trade for the Jets, all the talk immediately pivots to, does this open the door for Odell Beckham to join the Jets when they do finalize a trade for Aaron Rodgers? And we did hear from Robert Saleh on Odell Beckham this week.
Things have to work out. Obviously, there's a whole lot of different things. And again, I apologize. I'm deferring to Joe a lot, but those are things like when you start talking money and all that stuff, it becomes something else. So that's, again, something I'd have to defer to Joe.
So, Saleh, very brief on Odell Beckham. We know Rodgers was not. Rodgers was pretty honest about hopes of playing with Odell Beckham, or why wouldn't you want to? At this stage, coming off the injury, not playing in a while, how do we even project Odell's impact, even if it is in a good quarterback situation but a crowded situation?
I don't think you can.
Right?
I think fantasy-wise, it's a nice-to-have, must-have. Would not want to leave the draft needing to count on Odell Beckham Jr. It's one of those things that you draft him as your fourth wide receiver and you hope you get. You hope you get the old OBJ, but if it doesn't work out, then you're like, it's fine. I've got my 2 starters. I've got a third guy that I can slot in on bye weeks and that kind of thing. So that's what I would not. He might be overdrafted, especially if he goes to New York. He's a big name paired with Rodgers, assuming that trade goes through. So you could see a scenario where he gets overdrafted, but in terms of where I'll rank him and where I'll value him is a nice to have sleeper. But I would not want to count on him for anything this season.
Yeah, and I mean he was really good with the Rams. He did his job. He probably would have won Super Bowl MVP if he didn't tear his ACL in that game. But I mean, you're taking Alan Lazard over Odell Beckham, and there is a chance as well that Mecole Hardman might produce more than Odell. We just don't know with the injury and the age.
Yep.
Another wide receiver move on the market, wave 2 of the market here, guys. The Panthers continue to add to their wide receiver room. We know they signed Adam Thielen after trading DJ Moore. They signed DJ Chark from the formerly of the Lions, 1 year, $5 million contract here. Jay, obviously not maybe a big needle mover, but there's a lot of opportunity there in Carolina and what could be a solid offense depending on how their rookie quarterback plays.
Yeah, definitely, and they've got a really good offensive line, which helps. I mean, this is probably slightly bad for Thielen that there's another established vet there. I mean, DJ Chark's not super exciting, but I think it certainly raises the level of competence, and then probably also is relevant for, if it is CJ Stroud who's coming in there, it probably helps him, just that he's got more competent vets around him.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, a couple other free agent moves, maybe lower tier here. I want to know if any of these stand out to you guys. The Ravens signed Nelson Aguilar to a 1 year, $3.25 million deal. The Colts signed Isaiah McKenzie. The Giants just continue to add every slot wide receiver.
What's going on with the Giants?
On the market.
17 wide receivers.
And they're all playing the slot, by the way. Jameson Crowder goes.
They're not all going to make the team,
Yeah.
That's the thing.
The Cowboys signed Ronald Jones to a 1 year, $1.23 million deal. Kind of interesting there, considering it's just Pollard, but we know they're going to add a running back in the draft. The Jags signed Dearness Johnson to a 1 year deal, and then the Raiders add to their tight end room by signing Austin Hooper to a 1 year, $2.8 million deal.
So the 3 things that jump out at me, first off, just a question for you, Jay. Do you think when the Ravens signed Nelson Aguilar that's why Lamar Jackson demanded the trade? Like,
enough.
He was just
I've had
now
enough.
I'm done. For the love of God. That's your big free agent wide receiver move that you get me? Is
He's
Nelson
very
Aguilar,
much
I'm out.
from the same cloth as Devin Duvernay, DeMarcus Robinson.
They just
very
keep
much
doing this,
same
yes.
brand. How about we get DeAndre Hopkins?
Samuel Watkins, Deshaun Jackson.
Exactly. Could you? But the 2 ones that are interesting to me, the most interesting to me of all those is Austin Hooper. Sure. I mean, again, Darren Waller leaves a big target share. Foster Moreau has retired, or
medical leave with cancer.
Right,
yes.
exactly.
Yep.
So awful situation with Foster. But the fact is Austin Hooper is a nice pass catching tight end. Somebody who at one point in his career was the number 1 tight end in fantasy back in Atlanta his last year with the Falcons. And so in an offense that we don't think is going to be that, on a team that we don't think is going to have that good of a defense and is going to be having to throw a decent amount. I mean. Garoppolo has used his tight end. Obviously, we've seen it with Kittle in the past. Hooper becomes kind of interesting to me. It's kind of like if you punt on tight end and you're looking late. Yeah, like to me, Austin, of all those free agent signings, Austin Hooper with the Raiders becomes kind of interesting. Remember, Raiders tight ends had an 18% target share last season.
Yep. Isaiah McKenzie might be wide receiver 2 on the Colts if Alec Pierce doesn't make a big move behind Pittman. So that could
they lost Paris Campbell.
Yeah, lost Paris Campbell. That could be relevant.
Yeah, and I will say also that, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with JaMychal Hasty, but Dearness Johnson, who is, when he's gotten an opportunity to start in Cleveland, has proven himself he becomes an interesting insurance back for those that draft Travis Etienne high.
All right, that's a thin running back room. And
and he's a good guy, and it's a good offense, and he's a good player in a good offense, and so I think he would be a must draft if you draft Travis Etienne.
Download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today.
All right. Connor, you've been doing some draft rankings.
A couple here and there.
Some draft rankings. They show up on NBCSportsEdge.com. You've been grinding the tape.
That's right.
You're sort of bleary-eyed. You put on a Mets jersey instead of something football related, and so you now have your first sort of try at positional draft rankings.
Yeah, top
fives. This is your initial top fives at the position. So let's start at the quarterback, where everyone wants to. This is and you're basing this on what? Are you basing this on how you think they'll be as pros?
Yes.
Fantasy relevancy. Your rankings are what?
Exactly. So these are based on just pro potential. After they get drafted, I will tailor specific fantasy rankings because that is going to be very important, especially at the tight end position. I would think, of course, landing spots for running back and wide receiver. But with quarterbacks right here, we'll just start who I think has the best pro potential. Bryce Young is still number one for me. I know Stroud and Anthony Richardson have been the hotter names throughout this process. I still think Bryce Young is the smartest player at the position. He throws with the most anticipation, timing. He's got athleticism. The size is an outlier. You either are going to live with it or you're going to pass on it. And for me, it's an outlier I'm willing to accept. Stroud, another high-end player. These are both top 10 players to me, and then you get a little bit of a drop-off. I like Richardson's traits. I think he needs that redshirt year. Then Will Levis and Hendon Hooker, to me, guys, are in the same tier, and I know a lot of people don't really necessarily see it that way, but I do think there was a drop-off where Levis and Hooker probably both go in the first round, but I don't think they're the bona fide top 10 selections, and I think Hooker needs a redshirt year because of the injury, but I think Levis does just for slowing the game down a little bit.
Well, I saw our colleague Chris Sims, who always does his quarterback rankings as well. He loves Hooker.
Yeah, he seems very high on Hooker.
Seems very.
I think QB3.
I think that's what I saw as well, that he has him as his third best quarterback.
What is the infatuation with Will Levis? I don't really understand it.
He can throw it 400 yards.
Yes, yeah, right? That's it.
He's got
pro
a cannon
size. He has the pro body type. He can move a little bit, but the accuracy and the decision making is just not there.
Play quarterback?
It's just not there, right? And that's what. And then you start to hear the excuses that Kentucky lost a lot of talent. They had different coaching changes, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, he's got a long ways to go because the game's only going to get faster going from the SEC to the NFL level. So I think Levis needs time, and I think teams have cooled a little bit. We've gotten away from him being a top 5 pick to maybe more 6 to 15 kind of range.
Yeah. By the way, criticism of me is often the same. Like just poor accuracy, poor decision making.
Yeah.
It's often
big arm though.
Big arm. Got the NFL quarterback body. But
you don't put mayo in your coffee.
I don't put mayo in my coffee.
Yes. Do that. That's another few slots down the draft.
Yes.
It is interesting in terms of where we rank fantasy versus reality. Right? Is that a lot of the running backs will go much later in drafts, and yet they'll be drafted much higher in fantasy. Where are you, Connor, in terms of your running back rankings at the moment?
Bijan Robinson's going to be that 1-1 star in Dynasty. Everybody would love to get up and get Bijan, and you get it because you have a superstar running back for the next, 6 years. We don't know the shelf life anymore because he can run, he can catch, he can pass protect. He's really, to me, he really does remind me of Todd Gurley at his prime of what he can do. He creates missed tackles for us unlike anyone we've seen, and that's going all the way back to Saquon years ago. So Bijan's special, but then you get into Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, he looks like the third Cook brother to me, kind of this mix of Dalvin and James. Slender kind of guy, but excellent burst speed, outside zone ability. Charbonnet, a bigger back at UCLA, 6'2", 225, a transfer from Michigan, so he's a true Big Ten back playing in the pack, just running over everybody, but soft hands, big body, can handle the workhorse load. I think the fantasy community will be really high on Charbonnet because of the amount of carries he can handle. A-Chain's kind of a different guy, as you know him very well, Barry, obviously being an A&M player. Track speed, Dallas track superstar coming out of high school. He can hit the home run. I think his pass catching is still a work in progress, which kind of limits his rookie potential for me, but that home run hitting speed is special. And then you look at Tyjae Spears.
By the way, I'll just say about A-Chain, he's for a guy that's fast, he's tougher than you'd think. Like,
they run him in between the tackles.
They run him between the tackles in the SEC. I mean, and he can, there were a couple of games for A&M last year where, they kind of rode A-Chain, especially because they had issues at the quarterback position, and they had to lean on their run game. I like A-Chain quite a bit.
Yeah, and then Tyjae Spears is the last one. I think he'll be a popular fantasy sleeper depending where he lands because he's the smaller back that makes people miss. But they hand him the ball over 200 times, and he's fine. He can handle the workload, so don't be fooled by the size.
Yep. This year, stunning amount of rookies who contributed in fantasy straight away between Breece Hall before he went down, Dameon Pierce, Kenneth Walker, even Tyler Algier by the end of the season was having huge games. How many of these guys outside of Bijan are going to be able to produce that level?
I think all 5 of them. Maybe not at that level. Bijan has a higher ceiling than anybody we've seen in years. It's just that simple. Jahmyr Gibbs as well. I just wonder, does a team look at Gibbs' size and limit his workload? But he's got such explosive nature that he could be really, really special. And then Charbonnet is the one for me. I think he could be this year's Dameon Pierce. I really do. You look at the size, the ability to catch the football, break tackles, and if he goes to a place where it's, committee, but best player wins, he'll be the best player, I think, pretty quickly.
So I think it just depends on where they land, right? Because fantasy, it's not just about talent, but it's also opportunity. Like Ken Walker would have been drafted a lot higher had he, in fantasy, had he not gone to a situation where he was going to start the season behind Rashad Penny. And honestly, if Penny doesn't get hurt, who knows what ends up happening, if Ken Walker would have gotten a shot. I mean, they were running Penny, the first handful of weeks. Breece Hall was always going to sort of overtake that backfield at some point.
Just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time. But, the rest of the guys, again, Algier was in a committee. And so
I think a lot of these, we've now kind of crossed the Rubicon both with basically all positions where it's like you shouldn't be downgrading them necessarily just because they're a rookie. Like if they have the talent and they have the opportunity, guys just aren't sitting as much.
No.
I mean, you still obviously get situations like, Isaiah Spiller looks really cool, but he's behind an entrenched starter like Eckler. But for the most part, if you're looking at a Ken Walker and thinking that, maybe he's not going to get the chance even if Rashad Penny does go down because there's other guys in that backfield, I think coaches are showing a willingness across the board to ride rookies.
Yeah, I would agree with that for the most part, but then you just never know, right?
Sure.
I mean, James Cook is somebody that I thought should have gotten more run than he did in Buffalo last year. But again, veteran team with Super Bowl aspirations, and they probably, they wanted to trust, Devin Singletary, and then they make the trade for Hines, 2 veteran guys that maybe aren't as explosive as Cook, but you feel a little bit more, you feel safer about, and so. And it's always about rookies as well, right? In terms of
probably more relevant for the receiver position, just because we don't see these seasons out of Justin Jefferson, his rookie season, Olave and Wilson last year. That typically didn't really happen.
No, and we're not going to be spoiled in that group this year. We're not. I mean, running back's really good, quarterback's really strong. It's going to be a big dynasty quarterback year. We'll get to tight ends in a second. It's a massive tight end year. But when you look at the wide receiver ranks, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba can have a really big rookie season. I'm very high on him. He's been my number 1 wide receiver since last summer. And you hope he goes into a role where the team has a number 1 and he just plays the slot right away. That's what he did at Ohio State in between Olave and Garrett Wilson. But after that, it's a lot of role players, a lot of, number 2, number 3 types, Jordan Addison. Quentin Johnson has the size to be a number 1, but he's just not a natural pass catcher. Too many drops on tape for me and needs to play to that size more often. I like Cedric Tillman more than his teammate, Jalen Hyatt. I know everybody's high on Hyatt's speed. He's kind of a Will Fuller clone, but Tillman in 2021, massive game was against Alabama and Georgia. He was just hurt this year, so he's kind of that injury sleeper. If he didn't get hurt, he would be in everybody's top 5. Zay Flowers will be a hot name as well. I don't really trend to smaller wide receivers being in the top 2 to 3 each year for me. But if he goes somewhere where he could play the slot, he's kind of an Elijah Moore clone when you watch him play, very similar skill set. So that's going to depend on opportunity for Zay Flowers.
Yeah, and often does.
But we just don't have, like last year we were talking about Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jahan
Dotson, yeah.
I mean, my top 6 from last year would be ahead of every guy on that list except JSN. Yeah. So that's the difference in the receiver class.
JSN right now is minus 200 to be the first wide receiver taken. Is that done, or could anyone jump in?
I'm kind of surprised it's still on the board. There's a chance because of Quentin Johnson's size, but I mean, Jordan Addison with 173 at the combine and ran 4.49. That's just too small and not electric fast where he could sneak into number 1. It feels like it's almost a wrap at wide receiver 1.
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
Bet the minus 200.
Yeah.
Use promo code Barry at betmgm.com when you do that.
Essentially free.
Let's close out with tight ends.
Tight ends. So
I think you're higher on the number 2 guy perhaps than most.
Yeah, and that's because this is pro potential, right? Darnell Washington's calling card is he's a 6th offensive lineman with more receiving upside. The reason he didn't get the ball out at Georgia is because Brock Bowers, their tight end, he will be a future tight end 1 in fantasy in a couple of years from now. So Washington, maybe not a top guy in fantasy, but a great player. Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave down there at number 5, elite speed. these guys are pass catchers. And with Mayer, it's more possession, PPR kind of pass catching. But when you look at Kincaid and Musgrave, they have the speed up the seam to be big play pass catching threats. So we were due for a big tight end year, especially when you look at the barren wasteland in fantasy of if you don't have Kittle, Andrews, Pitts didn't have a good year, you're kind of scrapping week to week. I think this class can kind of buck that trend where you have some consistency at the tight end position in fantasy 2 years from now.
It'd be great. We would love that.
We need it.
I mean, you know,
We
like
need it.
there's, Kelsey, Hawkinson, Kittle, like it gets thin quick.
Sick of getting my heart broken by Isaiah Likely and those kind of types.
Isaiah Likely, I was waiting for him all year.
Maybe he can finally break out with Lamar Jackson's gone. Lamar was holding him back.
Yeah,
that
that's
what it
the
was?
problem.
Now that when they go, they're 5 running back.
Yeah, now when Zeke is playing
The
quarterback.
Carson Wentz-led Ravens offense. Going to
you're
Isaiah
talking.
Likely. What do you
Carson
think of
Wentz.
that,
It's
Jay?
just-
I don't love that. I don't love Carson Wentz.
Yeah,
Carson Wentz
maybe
cost me a lot
maybe
of money
all-pro
over the
quarterback
journey.
Tyler Huntley will return to the Ravens.
There you go.
People
Maybe.
forget that.
Yeah,
They do.
I'll never
they're-
forget it.
yeah. That he was an all-pro this year.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps it up for us,
That
guys.
wraps it up. Yeah, listen, it's closing time, man. You guys don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We're back next week. Check out rotoworld.com and NBCSportsEdge.com for all your fantasy needs, baseball or football. For Jay and Connor, I'm Matthew. We'll see you next week. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.